this is a ball that surprised me in a good way. As I'm analyzing the data, it shows up a lot. It pops up. There are a lot of reasons why you might recommend this ball, and I can't. It's not a ball I would recommend over anything else necessarily.
Here we are. No putts given. How you living, everybody? It's ball test time, Tony. All things ball test on this episode. We have one topic for this entire episode, and it's the ball test. You're kind of exhaling, but it's more of like a middle of the road exhale.
It's a brief exhale, and then we'll be right back at it with more ball test.
Waiting to exhale. Great movie, right? Back in the day, Tony, here's a quick question for you. Did a little stat tracking. The original featheries, right? These golf balls, leather pouches stuffed with feathers, roughly the equivalent of a top hat's worth of feathers. Do you know how much they cost in terms of today's dollars? So when you went back, like if you were to buy a feathery golf ball at that time, adjusted for inflation, roughly, loosely, how much they would cost today?
I'm going to go with $8.49.
It's not bad. Well over $10 per ball. Per ball. So $3-4 per ball. I mean, not only have we come a long ways in terms of performance, manufacturing, golf balls historically pretty cheap. So I don't know, just in case people want to complain about pricing, which they will, and so, but I just thought it'd be interesting. So yeah,
I don't set the prices, so I'm not the guy to complain to.
No, but like we said, you guys, this episode is all things ball test, an exhaustive process that we do right now every other year to quantify.
It's like one every other year too many. So much like this one.
Quantify golf ball performance, and we'll get to how you can maybe select a ball that you need that performs better for you. What is good performance? Is there such a thing as a bad performing golf ball, or is it just different? We're going to get to all that stuff. But this episode, all things ball performance. So, sorry, Victor Hovland. Great job, $18 million. Appreciate you. Hope you had a nice weekend. But we're talking golf balls today. So,
how about I get the $18 million and Victor can come talk about golf balls? I'd like to make that trade.
Right. No
be
doubt.
All right with that.
So,
just floating the idea.
We're going to start at the top, work our way down, deductive, general to specific.
There we go. We should just read it.
Do you want to just read it? Story time with Tony?
It word for word and point out specific parts which people are very clearly not reading.
We could have gotten Morgan Freeman. Yeah. Maybe we could do like a book on tape.
That'd be something.
What did we test? Where did we test? How many shots? Let's talk about the methodology. So just set that up briefly. What did we actually do?
Yeah, so we tested golf balls.
How many?
We tested 46 models. Just kind of take a brief interlude to tell you, because if you look at like most of the balls in the test make sense, right? You can kind of understand why we chose it. So
sure,
obviously we've got all of the stuff from the biggest manufacturer. So it makes sense to have that. And we've got the leading DTC stuff. We got Snells and Max Flies and Vices and that kind of Encore. Yep. Got that stuff. We've got like Inesis, which we've had in the previous two tests. Mm-hmm. Mizuno, smaller OEM, been in our previous test. Wilson, smaller OEM, being in our previous test. So Clearpan or Seed. We have Seed for the first time. Those two balls were voted on by our readers. Yep. We have all those, and then we have Not Your Ball.
Nacho Ball.
So, fun fact, the reason how Not Your Ball got into this test and why, if you look in how we tested, we note that it was one of a few balls that we did not purchase at retail. And see, what had happened was...
We
had this big plan for 50 golf balls, and then we added the calibration ball to each of our groups.
Yep.
And in doing that, yada, 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 I miscounted. And so at the end of the day, like literally 2 days before we're leaving for Arizona, I came to realize that we had allocated room to test 50 balls or 5 groups of 10, including control ball. And I only had 49 balls. And the Not Your Ball guys had reached out about being in the test. We knew they wanted to be in. And I looked around my office and I had 36 Not Your Balls. So I was like, there you go. They're in.
You're in.
So that's how Not Your Ball came to be in the test.
So how many shots? We were out in Phoenix, 2 different locations. It was hot.
Yeah.
Appreciably warm. Where were we? We were at what? Scottsdale National. We were
Scottsdale National Golf Club, Cool Clubs out in Fountain Hills at Sun Ridge Golf Course. So yeah, 2 locations, 2 robots, 2 MyGolfSpy test teams, if you will. So you and Rob at Scottsdale, Connor and Philip locked away at in Fountain Hills, and then video team and myself moving back and forth for them to keep capture content, me to make sure everything was on track, running smooth to the extent possible. And yeah, that was kind of the deal.
Yes, we had robots. This is all robot testing, engineers, etc. So again, we wanted to isolate golf ball performance, just see literally what happens to the golf ball. How does a golf ball perform at certain conditions? And we're going to kind of go into those based on high swing speed, low swing speed, middle of the road swing speeds, what those were, what we tested, and just kind of a brief recap of some of the results. But before we get too specific, what are just some of our big findings? Like kind of the major takeaways, if you...
Our key findings?
Oh, sure. Major findings. Key findings.
Yeah, I mean, this
big
one
findings.
Maybe isn't new. We've worded it different ways, but I keep coming back to this idea that high compression golf balls can work for nearly everyone. And then it kind of runs in... Like we get the question all the time. It's the one that probably just makes me want to bang my head into my desk more than anything else. And that's what's the I swing? Pick a number, right?
83 miles an hour.
I swing 83 miles an hour. What's the right compression for my swing? And I'm like, no, there isn't one. When we talk about finding the right golf ball, the key things are spin and then flight, which I know golfers more commonly hear it as launch angle, but with the golf ball, the flights, you really got to talk in terms of full trajectory. And it's, I will say, kind of quick tip if you want to, I wouldn't say fun, but if you're curious, kind of either try and plot this out roughly, or you can try and visualize it in your head. But you kind of have these balls that I would say launch high, fly high, and come down shallow. And then you have these others that are relatively low launch, climb really high, and then kind of, not straight down, but steeper descent angles. So it's kind of understanding like all of the bits and pieces of trajectory. But anyway, yeah. So high compression.
So high compression.
Detour. Basically, I mean, what we look at is unless you need low spin
at all costs.
Unless you need a low spinning golf ball. Low compression may not be for you because they are invariably low spin. I mean, at best we can kind of get into the low mid spin range, and that's on truly soft models. We kind of classified here as mid 70s. The soft golf balls that we thought performed really well, and again using soft more broadly, stuff like the Bridgestone Tour BXS, the MaxFly Tour S, which is just one of those ones where it seemed like every list of top performers or every top 10
we're going to get to that one. That one
showed up a lot, and that's another one where compression is low 80s. So it's soft by, if your comparison is to a Pro V1X, Chrome Soft X, it's soft by that standard, but it's not a super soft. And that's really, if you need any kind of spin in your game, that's about as soft as I would recommend going.
Okay.
And we talked about this before. The most fit golf ball, when Titleist does ball fittings, I don't know if it's still the case with the new lineup being out now or since the beginning of the year, but Pro V1X was the ball they fit most often across all ranges of golfers because it tends to be higher launching, higher flying, which a lot of golfers need, and higher spinning, which we know a lot of golfers need. When we look at our iron test, for example, we see balls that fly too low and don't spin enough through every test as iron lofts have gotten stronger. And you find out like the solution to that problem, or at least a way to mitigate it, is with a higher compression ball, which is going to spin more and typically maybe not fly as high as the softest offerings or soft offerings, but that spin is typically going to work to your benefit.
So you probably need some more compression in your game. Some balls, year over year over year, are tweaks on a formula, right? Pro V1 has stayed pretty similar, minus the fact when they flip-flopped Pro V1 and Pro V1X and confused the living daylights out of everybody. Still confuses the living daylights out of so many people. But more often than not, some of those balls we see, okay, incremental changes over time. Not always the case. Like Mizuno, for example.
Yeah,
this year's version, RB2 or X and RB2, like, vast, like, you shouldn't even almost associate them with the previous generation. Like, they almost should have called them something, entirely different, like thick muscle design or something.
Like, should have let Facebook translate this. If we go back to the prior generation RB Tour, and we'll touch on this with the idea of there's no such thing as a bad golf ball, but they were really niche. Like they were low flying, high spinning golf balls. And I mean, when you're talking percentage of the market, it's not a ball that's going to fit a lot of people.
Right.
And what we saw is flight come up appreciably, spin come down. And certainly with the RB Tour X in particular, that was interesting to me because I'd played it a little bit. It was sort of, I was kind of using it as my my provisional for a while. And I was like, wow, I really like the flight of this ball. It's like high, it spins, but not too much.
Only so Tony has a regular ball and a provisional ball.
It's a great opportunity to test out new products. Like
provisional for a lost ball. Well, that one was the Titleist. This one's Mizuno. All right.
Yeah, we're going to try something new. Last one didn't work. I mean, why not switch it up?
Hey, it's a good time.
Yeah, and so I was really kind of intrigued by what I saw on the course, and then to get it out on the robot and see kind of that same thing where it's, I would say it's among the highest flying. As you start to look at things from a more statistically inclined angle, among the highest flying, I would say, throw in TP5 and the Z-Star Diamond in there on the driver. And yeah, it's a ball that it's just really intriguing, and I think one that could easily get overlooked, but has some flight and spin properties that could work for a lot of guys.
Yeah, like I said, showed up a lot more often in some of our recommendations than I thought.
Conversely, than the lack of evolution. You talk about Titleist, they're not going to do too much. I talked about dropping a little spin from the driver in the X, but that ball is kind of where they want it to be, and so it's improve it, but don't change it kind of a situation.
Yeah.
And the one for me that was, I don't want to say a disappointing ball because it's $18 a dozen. And at that price, you almost get to be disappointed, or you would expect to be. But the new Kirkland, I just didn't see anything in there that suggests it's evolved much at all. Like the spin, it's still really high spinning. I would still describe it as a niche ball. There's nothing about it other than the spin. It's not particularly fast. It's not particularly long. And it's, the selling point is it's an $18 ball that's still $18, I guess.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about total performance in our findings, and more so that we kind of tested that way too with driver, multiple swing speeds, iron, multiple swing speeds. We're going to have some wet wedge versus dry wedge or wet dry stuff coming out.
Super fascinating.
Which is super fascinating. And kind of for one of the tweaks this time that I was really interested to pay attention to was kind of this approximating idea of green side spinner control. And we hadn't done it this way before. And I want to kind of point that out in key findings is, hey, that 30, 40, 50-yard pitch shot from around the green is one that players end up with all the time. And we kind of this time saw some things that were noteworthy.
Yeah, this one was interesting because we've tried this spin test, this wedge spin in the past. In the first year, we did a full pitching wedge, and what we came to realize is, guess what? Like the spin profile off a full pitching wedge is pretty close to the spin profile off a short iron. Like if it's whatever you see on a 7 or an 8 iron, you're going to more or less see on a wedge. So we're like, oh, that didn't do it. And then last year, I think we got down to, I want to say, 55, might have even been 85
somewhere in there.
I can't remember. And it
wasn't 35, which is what we did this
we
year.
still didn't get that spin separation. And I can't say we know it's there, but we've been told it's there. And so, in talking to ball manufacturers, I asked the question, you say greenside, what are we really talking about? Define greenside, give me a number. And the range was typically anything from 15 to 50 yards. And, with testing with robots, it gets a little dicey with lower speed. And so we wanted to get the shortest shot where we felt we could get reliable data and see separation, and not necessarily, you're not looking to blow everything wide open, because in the middle there's going to be a lot of similarity. You're going to expect the majority of balls in the test to be separated by a few hundred RPMs, allowing for tolerances within launch monitor readings and things like that. You're really talking about 100 RPMs or less difference. And so we kind of were hoping to see something more on the extremes, and we found that. And so that was really cool to kind of finally get some separation and see, things like a Bridgestone Tour BXS, which we know is supposed to spin a lot around the green, actually show near the top of the list this time, and things like that. So it's just trying to get a little bit better on that, on a wedge shot, knowing also that doing the wet dry stuff, we were going to pick up some full swing data on wedges along the way anyway. So big win for us.
And once again, DTC or house brands, we, again, these are ones that direct to consumer, so not necessarily part of a larger company. Your Snell's, Vice, MaxFly as a house brand of Dick's Sporting Goods. You're not going to buy MaxFly at a retail location. Caught a lot of momentum, I guess, in the DTC world really in the last 4 or 5 years. And once again, we saw a lot of really, really intriguing and really good performance from these brands.
Yeah, I mean, MaxFly continues to impress. I think, the way we did it this year, we kind of limited our top picks to 3. And as I mentioned in the text, I could have gone 3 to 4 models deep every time. And I really tried to put myself in a mindset of, hey, if a buddy came to me, somebody I play golf with, and I kind of know a little bit about his swing, I've watched him play, and he says, hey, what would you recommend for me? Like, I wanted to kind of stick to the first 3 I would go to. But certainly MaxFly continued to impress. Vice continues, like the Vice stuff by and large has tested well for us on the robot. We know it's good stuff. Cedo 2 we'll talk about a little more, even though the 01 is one of those that, as we've talked about, right? It was a ball in the test. That is to say, like, it didn't stand out in any particular way. And that's not a bad thing, because like, you stand out because you're in the top 10 here or there and on our charts, or because during testing something really weird being a euphemism for bad happened. And so, pretty Cedo 1, a ball in the test, Cedo 2, kind of a niche one that's super interesting, kind of not quite where the old Mizuno balls were, but that kind of thing where, if you're looking for something that's really kind of a flatter trajectory, okay. PXG, that one surprised me for sure, because knowing like it shares some of its DNA, but not all of its DNA with the Kirkland. Right. And it's definitely on the higher spinning side, but there's enough differentiation between the fact that it spins a little bit less and it's appreciably faster because of the higher compression. I'm like, yeah, this is a ball that surprised me in a good way. And the other one on this list, the LA golf ball, which again is one that, as I'm analyzing the data, it shows up a lot. It pops up. There are a lot of reasons why you might recommend this ball. The challenge here is it's $70, and I can't. It's not a ball I would recommend over anything else necessarily. Like, we could probably put in a specific set of parameters where I would say, hey, this is the best ball for you because you do these 6 things.
Sure.
But at $70, like, it performed well, but I not well enough to justify the price tag. It's not like a magic ball, right? It wasn't longer than everything else. It didn't have amazing spin slope where it, basically was super low spin
Does
off the
something
driver for
that no
distance
other
and
ball can
spun.
claim that it does or
Yeah.
whatever. You're like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
No,
if you need this.
guess what? It's a golf ball. And
Right.
that's,
Right.
for what it is. So
Now, as much as people want, and we rank and we recommend balls, you're fond of saying to a degree there's no such thing as a bad ball. What do you mean by that?
yeah, let's taking the ball lab stuff we do off the table where we can go,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
these are pretty bad balls because the manufacturing consistency isn't as good as someone else, for example, or the market average or whatever it happens to be. But in terms of performance, I like to say there's no bad balls. It's just simply that some balls fit way more people than others. And so, we talked about the previous generation Mizuno. Going back to our original ball test, the Volvics we tested were kind of in that same type of category where they have atypical launch and spin, like something like, hey, it
right.
flies super low but spins a lot. And ultimately, even the Kirkland, right, which I would describe as an excessively spinny golf ball, there is somebody out there who needs that profile.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the idea of there not being a bad ball from a performance perspective. You just have balls that fit way more people than others. And yeah, maybe some of these balls only fit like 5 people. But,
Right.
For those, if you're one of those 5 guys, you're not going to do better.
Yeah. So, first time I thought about that, I'm like, oh, I mean, I get it, but yeah, I mean, you really have to think about it. Like, is a size 18 shoe a bad shoe? No, it's not
Just
a
doesn't
bad
fit.
shoe. It's just only going to fit, 0.02% of the population. That's why they carry a lot of 9, 10s, and 11s, or whatever the case is. And so when we look at recommendations for golf balls, we're saying, hey, because you're probably a 9, 10, or 11 shoe size, you're, in general, most often, if these are the characteristics you need out of a golf ball, here's what we're going to recommend. Oh, and by the way, most golfers will need or be best suited by these type of performance characteristics. But that doesn't mean there's somebody that doesn't need a size 18 shoe or or a size 1 or whatever the case is. It's just by and large it's probably not you, because it just probably isn't. But so be
Yeah, I
it.
mean,
However,
they all
most
fit
people,
on it all plots out on a fitting bell curve. And most of this stuff is in that fat part because golf companies want to sell golf balls, and so by and large, you try and design a ball that's going to fit a lot of golfers because there's not a lot of money in a ball that doesn't.
right, you're right, and so that's a fair point too. If you have a company that says, "Hey, this ball we think is going to fit 1% of the population," you might say, "Hey, that's kind of a miss if you're trying to make a golf ball that fits a much larger percentage of the population. Something went wrong there. Your ball isn't necessarily bad, it just isn't going to sell very well." If that was your goal, to sell a lot of golf balls, this one,
it's probably bad for you, but for
right.
golfers, there's somebody you can help there.
Right, right. We already talked about kind of trajectory and launch angle, but really to think about this idea of speed and trajectory together. You have the need, Tony, the need for speed.
Yeah, this is one where the boss really wanted to simplify the H2, and I can't even remember what it was, but the need for speed is catchy. It's familiar.
Yeah, it is.
I don't even remember. Like mine was really long, but the point in all of it was in kind of diving through the data was that for the most part, again, allowing for some niche opportunities or necessities, if you will, you can find a ball that provides the flight that you need, the spin properties you need without sacrificing ball speed.
There
and
you
so
go.
as I was kind of working through it and making my top picks throughout the text, one of the things that was kind of the tiebreaker for me is, all right, which is one of these appreciably faster than the other? And there may be some exceptions, but I tried to avoid recommending a ball that produced below average ball speed in any scenario. If I could find a ball that was matched the other launch parameters or was in a reasonable ballpark thereof. How's that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. That was the part that jumped out to me is yes, there's going to be anomalies and people, 3 standard deviations plus away from the mean. But in general, you don't need to sacrifice speed, which is directly tied to compression, for the other performance characteristics that you need. So there's no reason for the vast majority of people to say, hey, I need a slower golf ball. I need a lower compression golf ball because I need it to do this, this, and this as well. Not the case. You're going to find a ball that does this, this, and this just as well, if not better, and doesn't make you pay a speed penalty for it. To me, I think that's a big aha.
And
That's a
there
big
are always
takeaway.
going to be exceptions, right? We've talked about
Yeah,
the uber high spin guy, high speed, really high spin guy off the driver where you have to kind of throw everything out the
right,
window, knowing that, yeah, the low compression, you're going to lose a little bit of speed or a lot of speed that way, but you're
right,
going to get a lot back because of the lower spin. You're going to hit it straighter. I mean, there are reasons why you
right.
would go in that
There's
direction,
just,
but in terms of just like,
yep,
trying to optimize those windows and things like that, you shouldn't need to
yeah.
give up too much in the way of speed.
All right, we're going to spend 5, 6, 7 minutes here on each of our categories, kind of give a brief overview of kind of what we went through. Like I said, we broke it down by swing speed. And we have high, middle, and low. And in general, if you're somebody in between those, these do function pretty linearly, meaning, if you're right in between high and mid, you can just kind of connect those two dots and assume that you're going to be pretty close. But
Yeah,
what we did
there's a
too
little
is
wiggle, but yeah,
there's a
for sure.
little wiggle, but more or less. And what we did is we configured the robots right to produce launch conditions most suited to and most indicative of that particular player. So high swing speed, 150-mile driver swing speed, we had the robot hit it as someone with 115 miles an hour swing speed would typically hit it. So in terms of launch and spin and these things, it wasn't like, hey, we're going to launch it at 18 degrees with 1500 RPM and just
Just to see how
see what
far we can make
happens,
it
right?
go.
Just to see
Yeah.
how far we can go. No,
Yeah, we
we
worked
said,
on these numbers with, we bounced this off. We probably half a dozen ball makers we sent our proposed parameters to and
mm-hmm,
solicited their feedback. And where this came from by and large is we went back. We're always trying to get better. And we looked at the test we did 2 years ago, and I'm like, all right, how could we improve this? And kind of the two very obvious things were we need iron shots to spin more, and
right,
we need our high speed driver to launch lower and spin less to
right,
more closely represent what golfers in those demographics do. So,
yep.
we developed new targets, and we did our best with working with our engineering partners to hit those targets in the robot
Boom,
configuration.
hit
And
them.
certainly we got really close, or I'm happy is what I would say for sure. So
Yeah, without a doubt. So high swing speed. Let's just talk through some of the results here. People can obviously click through all the metrics, and we'll point out some of the charts and things that you can literally spend years playing with, comparing, contrasting, sliders, all sorts of fun things. But what did we see, Tony? So it's 115 miles an hour driver swing speed.
yeah, and a lot of it's kind of, and so with the recommendations, what we kind of started at the first break off was let's classify by spin. So we make
Mm-hmm.
recommendations for low spin, mid spin, and high spin. And then from there, I mention it in the text, but we don't higher up in the text, but in each section, we don't explicitly call it out. But the objective was among the three to pick one that was on the lower flying side, one that was mid flying, and one that was higher flying, understanding that because driver performance doesn't always perfectly align with iron performance. For example, a ball
Sure.
that flies really high off a driver may only fly kind of in a middle trajectory window for an iron. So not perfect buckets, but that was the idea. Is like, hey, if I need a low spin, low flying golf ball, the first one on this list is right for me. Whereas if I need a high flying, high spinning golf ball, then maybe it's the first one next to, on the last list kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, low
So
spin, high
on
fly.
that
There
low
we go on the
spin, we
first one.
had MaxFly Tour S Pro V1X Left Dash and Titleist AVX were the recommendations for high swing speed players that need low spin. So this would be like, hey, we are, you're constantly battling, I don't know, maybe pushing 3,000 or something. You are losing distance significantly because of spin. Let's get you there. Let's do it. If you're kind of in that middle of the road spin, where it's like, yeah, I don't want anything to spin more, but I don't need to drop 6, 7, 800 RPM. Here we go. Mizuno RB Tour X pops up in
like
the
I
mid
said,
spin.
that ball just like it's just one of those ones that popped a lot. And I would expect the Pro V1 and the Pro V1X to show up a lot. I know where Left Dash is going to show up. I know Chrome Soft X. Like we know what that ball is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
But to kind of see like Mizuno and also on this list, the Strixon Z-Star Diamond, kind of unknowns. We hadn't never tested a diamond, I don't believe. And only the previous generation of Mizuno, and so to kind of see these stand out as fast, as high flying, Strixon higher spinning, but again, that's why it's on the high spin list. But
well, right,
it's one of those. I don't want to say it's a 1-for-1 with Chrome Soft X, but it's reminiscent of CSX in that it is a higher spinning golf ball that doesn't suffer distance off the driver for it.
Yeah,
I think keep in mind, kind of a fitting consideration. I was actually texting one of the guys at Callaway about this earlier. Like, I love Chrome Soft X on off the driver on days when I'm moving it right to left. If I'm moving it a little left to right, if I'm hitting a fade that day, the spin will get me. So it's one of those kind of conscious things to kind of think about. Like, oh yeah, if I'm not kind of floating it a little bit, it's great. But if I'm doing anything that puts a little bit of spin on it, it crosses the threshold for me. So that's kind of a fitting consideration as well. But anyway, there's a list for info.
Yeah, the other thing, just two things really quickly jumped out to me is of the 9 recommended balls, 4 are Titleist. I thought that was interesting. In my guess, I have zero data to back this up, so you can tell me I'm 100% wrong. But my hunch would be is if we took 100 people at this swing speed, more than half of them would probably need low or mid spin.
Yeah, I think
more often than not, your higher swing speed players aren't looking to necessarily add spin unless it's, like I said, for a very, very specific reason. So again, just pointing this out, that if that were to be true, you see, again, you have 4 Titleist balls there, 3 of which are played a lot by a lot of golfers and a lot of really, really good golfers who tend to have higher swing speed. So just interesting to see that data kind of line up. But
and again, we talked about like there's a breaking point where I just feel like you can't go too soft unless you really have a spin problem. And even these are so the MaxFly Tour S and the AVX both 80-ish compression. So that's really as soft as I think you can go here. And again, you really need to have the low spin and the lower flight in some cases where Left Dash, I wouldn't, again, market as a whole, right? For Titleist will tell you it's a high flying golf ball. You line it up with everything we tested and it's more towards the middle. But I mean that's their lineup. One that it's if you come to me and say I just want to hit it far off the driver, where do I go?
Yeah,
it's Left Dash, it's Chrome Soft X, it's maybe Pro V1X. It's you're going to need compression.
Yeah, exactly, and that's backed up by our longest golf balls that in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and again we're talking a total difference of a handful of yards, so 4, 5, 6 steps total. It goes Pro V1X Left Dash, then Pro V1X, Mizuno RB Tour X, which like you said, a welcome surprise, Vice Pro Plus, Strixon Z-Star Diamond. So that's kind of one of the first higher spinning balls that we saw with a lot of really good distance, but followed right up by Callaway Chrome Soft X. So by no means are we saying that these higher spinning balls within that category are like going to be, significantly shorter. They're not.
No, like
absolutely they're not.
They're kind of those spinnier balls that hold up. And so I was the Z-Star Diamond, as I'm crunching the data, that's one too. I'm like, all right, this one impresses me.
Yeah, and we saw it again on, just moving to the iron part really quickly, on the high swing speed situation as well. Again, goes back to that total performance part. It isn't just like, oh my gosh, how fast is this golf ball off an 8 iron? How far does it go, right? It's about matching up the launch that you need, the trajectory that you need, the spin profile that you need. But it isn't, again, that a higher spinning ball isn't long, because Z Star Diamond was the third longest ball we tested off the irons, and it was only, what, zero point 0.3 miles an hour behind a much higher compression ball, left dash.
Yeah, and that's where kind of you need to. That's why you don't just buy the ball that goes the farthest off the driver. Left dash, I love that ball. We know a lot of our readers who have tried it love it, but for some guys, that one's not going to spin enough off an iron, and so
Right.
maybe you'll be a better suited for a Chrome Soft X, which spins more off an iron, or this Z Star Diamond, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's about trying to pair everything, all kind of every shot you're going to hit, and find the one that I describe it as a process of elimination, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the one that's last not to work in
Right.
some respects, but yeah.
Right. Right. And again, yeah, I mean, I like looking at the total distance. I like looking at the iron stuff. I really like the observational part where we kind of point out um, what's higher trajectory, what's lower total trajectory. Obviously, like one of the lower flying ones, Bridgestone Tour BX, was also the second longest in that particular category. So,
Yeah, when we talk
you know,
about our top picks, and I say, hey, if I had three more slots, like the
right.
BX would have been on a lot of lists. That's one
Mm-hmm.
where, like, it was
Mm-hmm.
just, yeah. I mean, I can't say anything negative about it. It was just really, it's not quite the one that would have been first to mind. Like I said, if a buddy asked me, but I mean,
Yeah.
solid performance.
Yeah, and you're not going to see the same separation, like I said, off the irons as you get down from irons, short irons into wedges. Ball speed rankings. I think we went from about 118 miles an hour to 118.3 for maybe the top 10.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
three
it's
tenths of a mile an hour separating ball speed. Again, that's not where you're going to see the separation. Really, that's not where you should be making a decision that, like, oh my gosh, yep, this one's zero point 0.2 miles an hour faster off an 8 iron.
yeah, and this again for me is that idea of elimination of like, I don't I don't necessarily think you should say, "Hey, I'm gonna choose an LA Golf over a TaylorMade TP5 because it's zero point 0.3 miles an hour faster." It's making sure that those other variables come to mind, but also
Mm-hmm.
knowing like these are all comparably fast balls. When you get down to the other end of this table, then you start to see differences, and so it's not so much about making sure you have the fastest ball in every possible scenario, but
Right.
avoiding the slow ones. They just don't need a slow golf ball.
Yep, like I said, get all the performance you need without having to sacrifice speed. Mid swing speed results, Tony, again, of our set of 9 here, a little bit of a different constellation. Again, we're talking mid swing speed, so this is roughly 100 miles an hour with the driver, right? We were 115 with the driver before, and about 87 miles an hour with the 8 iron. Now we're backing it down a little bit, so we're going to say we're at 100 miles an hour with the driver, right? And then we are going to be down in the 77 mile per hour range with the 8 iron
Yep.
swing speed.
Yep.
So just any
Yeah, and
things
this.
jump out to you there? Yeah.
So you've heard me say this before, right? One is an anomaly, two is a curiosity, and three is a pattern. And
Right.
so we are into the
Right.
curiosity phase where on the mid swing speed setting we see left dash dip a little bit, right? Like it
Yeah.
drops a little bit. So left dash was the one that didn't kind of make this list. I still
Uh
think in
huh.
this crowd, right? Pro V1, Pro V1X, you're going to find guys that do really well with it. Chrome Soft X again. I'm going to keep coming back to that one throughout the test. Z Star
Yep.
Diamond here again.
Right.
Tour BXS, and now we start to see the Bridgestones. I mentioned this early on in the text where I just think our last test was the previous generation of these balls.
Uh
We're
huh.
only a handful of months out from the next generation, but
Yeah.
it's really encouraging because, in my opinion, based on what we've seen in the data, these balls were significantly better, and yet like RX got faster and firmer. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's more of more like a Max Fly Tour S kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, it's just I mean they're right
Yeah. And
here,
I
but
know. I know as much as you said this that there aren't bad golf balls, but as if I'm just taking notes here and going, hey, how many times is a ball ending up on kind of our recommended list? If people are kind of looking through that, they're going, all right, well, good testing year for Titleist, not much of a surprise there. This Z Star Diamond, that's kind of intriguing.
Yeah, and I
All
would
right,
point out too
well,
the Vice Pro Soft, which is another one that kind
yeah,
of tested good for us last time. It felt like for where it was in the compression space, it
hmm
overperformed. I say kind of overperformed its compression, and so
sure,
we saw that again. So that's yeah. I mean, it's another one. Not that I would say it's the right ball for me, but in terms of somebody
no,
looking
but
for that low
just
spin kind of softer feel, yeah, I
yeah, I
don't.
mean, because as much as and this is true, we tested 50 golf balls, which is a lot. There's obviously also a lot of overlap in terms of
Mhm.
performance, and so if we wanted to get really like draconian about it, we could probably eliminate 34 or 40 of those golf balls and still pretty much ideally fit the vast majority of golfers. So you could probably vote quite a few of those off the island. So you're seeing like, okay, if you actually did that, what balls would be kept?
Yeah, and I mean
You know,
this mid swing speed space is like because it is the fattest part of the fattest part. You
hmm
just feel like you
hmm
could, and you start to understand like guys are like, well, I can't tell the difference between, and you
right,
can kind of understand like, yeah, if you can't tell the difference between a Max Fly Tour, for example, and several others that are very similar to it, I get that. It's again the biggest differences are going to be at the tails, but
hmm
yeah,
hmm Yeah, no, I agree because again, you see like even on looking at total distance in mid area, right? Things that are popping up. Titleist again, Chrome Soft X. Like I would say that one was a winner from this year. Definitely a step forward. MaxFly again, Tour X, Tour S. That franchise, this was a good year for testing for them. Z Star Diamond popped up far more often than I mean that was a surprise to me, but great year for Strixon, and then you have to throw
yeah.
Mizuno
There
in
were
there as well.
one or two places where I almost got to Z Star in the top three. XV
hmm
didn't really pop for me anywhere, but like I
hmm
said, Diamond, and again, a little bit kind of a niche offering with the
Yeah.
flight and spin properties, but yeah, like I said, I really liked it. I found it really impressive throughout the test.
Yeah. Ball speed rankings. Bam. Max Flight, Tour X, Left Dash, Z Star Diamond, PXG
PXG.
Extreme. That's another one that did, like you said, did well in a lot of categories. Again, kind of just going through some of the spin. We saw that spin, right? You got to find the spin that's right for you. It's not necessarily, hey, take that, a lot of times fitters say kind of take the number on the iron, multiply it by 1,000. There's your target, right? So 7 iron in that 7,000 range. Okay, that's not the worst place to start, but that does not mean that everybody should be generating 7,000 RPM of backspin on their 7 iron.
Yeah, and
Some are
we
going to
know
need
that especially with this a lot of guys in that space who struggle to get spin in general, playing the strong lofted irons and pairing them with a low compression slash low spin golf ball. At some
right,
point, you wonder like, oh yeah, I get the idea as well. The dynamic loft of the irons is going to kick in, and they're going to launch it higher, and they're going to get stopping power from the descent angles. But then you look at the rest of the data and go, yeah, you know what? These guys, they're not able to take advantage of the dynamic loft, so they're not hitting it high enough. It's
right.
still landing shallow, so we need to look at the golf ball to put some spin into this, especially if we're not going to weaken loss.
Yeah, and this is a total aside, but I cannot wait for the time when we can, and we've talked to some people about this too, right? About actually getting more on course performance data about golf balls or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because I, use my dad as an example. So, yeah, that's great. I understand that you might be able to get him to an ideal launch and spin with a lower compression ball, like off a tee, off a mat in a controlled environment. But this guy ain't hitting 14 fairways around, not hitting, not so often it's coming off a very lie out of the rough, something where
Right.
I need even
Something that's
more
going to
launch and
take more
spin.
spin, right? It's going to fly lower, it's going to
Exactly.
spin less still, and it
Yeah.
just,
So
yeah.
I need to err on the side of maybe even more launch and spin than what might look ideal in a fitting. Anyway, total aside. there. But let's go to some of the lower swing speed stuff here, Tony. This is so again, we went from 115 to 100. Now we're down to 85 miles an hour swing speed on a driver, which is a lot of people out there. A tremendous number of people out there. And we're, maybe 65? Let me scroll down here. 65, 67 swing speed. So we went from 87, 77, 67. So roughly down 10 a time. What's jumping out to you
this
here?
one, this one I tried to integrate a little, again, allowing for the rules I established earlier. Like, I wasn't going to recommend something that was really slow, but I was kind of thinking of like, all right, what would somebody in this group typically want? And that typically means soft to a degree. And when you're looking for high spin, you can't get there. And right. So I went, higher spinning soft balls. Obviously, we've talked about Z-Star, Diamond several times. Pro V1X, always going to be on that list. PXG Extreme, because it does spin and it's fast. And then we kind of, started getting some stuff in here. The MaxFly Tour X, higher compression for sure, maybe the highest of this lot, but performed really well for this swing speed. Kind of good max of speed, flight, and spin properties. Callaway Chrome Soft, if we start to go a little softer here, LA Golf, we've talked about this one, just kind of surprising. Hard to justify the price, but again, from a performance perspective, it works. And then at that low spin property, that's where we can go a little bit softer. So like I said, MaxFly Tour S actually kind of a soft-ish, but the other two, RXS and Pro Soft, soft by everything other than Duo and super soft standards in this test. So I think if you are willing, either need the low spin or are willing to tolerate it, and again, MaxFly Tour S kind of a little bit more spin there than maybe those others, but still on the lower side.
Yeah, and some repeat performers on there again: Diamond, MaxFly, Titleist, like you said, PXG popping up there if you need the higher spin, Chrome Soft once again. And like you said, if we'd extended this to maybe 4 or so, you would have seen Bridgestone on there probably quite a bit more frequently.
I think the XS would have gone on there. Believe it or not, I think I would have gotten to left dash pretty quickly next in line too. We know, like, even at slow swing speed, because of those low spin, or rather the higher flying properties. Again, this group, it's more of a distance play for sure. But it's not super low spin. We talk about it being low spin, but it's not like Chrome Soft low spin, right? It's still kind of a moderate, kind of a mid-flying, moderate spin, fast offering. So it can work here as well, but
it's not egregiously low spin.
No. But again, I think when you factor feel, maybe you get to the Tour BXS would be pretty close to next on the list. The Encore Elixir is another one which, was almost on the list numerous times. Vero X2 less so, I would say. It was kind of an oddball of a ball.
Not as much. And then just briefly here on the 35-yard wedge, like I said, the wedge portion of the test designed to replicate a greenside shot of roughly 35 yards. Okay, cool. Didn't necessarily expect to see wild variations, our calibration balls 5,500, so 5,489, I think specifically. We saw some closer to 6,000.
Yeah, it's
on the high end, so another 500 RPM, which okay.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I don't think it necessarily needs to be said, but prefaced, of course, with under the conditions tested, which we make note of in the in this article. The TP5 did not. It's a niche performer. That's how I would describe it, right? It's kind of
that one's not going to fit a ton of people.
Spins a lot, and we could speculate as to why that is, but
sure.
If you're looking for something that spins, particularly around the green, like that was one, along with the Inesis, obviously pick these three, but I think, those are your best bets. And obviously if you're going to be a guy who wants a ball from a bigger brand, something that's played on tour, like greenside spin, and with those kind of qualifications, TP5 is.
What do you think is, like, when we talk greenside spin, what is enough spin so that you're not sacrificing performance. Or like I said, our calibration ball is Pro V1, and that one is roughly 5,500. Can I go down to 5,300, 52,
I
5,000?
mean,
Like,
I
where
think a
am
lot of
I?
guys do. It's a matter of, right, how much in how you play the game, how much do you want to be able to sort of carry it to the target versus how much do you want to rely on roll and controlling that. And
Right.
a lot of times you're probably talking about a foot or two. Some of these is probably a couple 2-3 yards. But ultimately, when you kind of extrapolate that, like, would you rather have a 3 foot putt or an 8 foot putt? Like, there are differences there, and
Well,
so
right. Right.
um, you know, I prefer, me personally, I prefer to be able to fly it right to the flag, or as close as I can, because that's kind of the known condition. All right, once you start rolling it, maybe there's some slope you didn't see, or breaks
Hmm.
left, breaks right. More variables come into play.
Yeah.
Like, if I can, because here, right, you're not worried. It's not to say it's not unimportant or it's never a factor, but you're not worrying about wind to the extent you would be
Sure.
in other circumstances and things like that. So my
Yeah.
preference is to fly it and try and stop it. But if you're I don't care, I'm going to roll it. I'm going to get it on the green. I'm going to carry it 1 foot onto the green and let it roll as much as possible. Then it's a different answer for what's right for you.
Yeah. Well, this is going to kind of go right into some of our FAQ stuff, and I mean, the amount of data on this one particular article is it's a little mind blowing in the sense that you can get lost in, I mean, these Tableau charts and things that you have loaded in there, the graphics and the information. I mean, I've been looking at this for weeks in an ancillary fashion, and I couldn't take it all in one day. I'm continuing to kind of come back, and then have a question. I'm like, ooh, what about this? Like, that's when I was looking. I'm like, hey, I like to kind of, okay, how much greenside spin do I actually need? If I filtered out, anything below 5,000, would my ball still be in there? Those kind of things. So it's an awful lot of information. People are going to ask this question, and they should. How do I take all this and actually use it? Like, how do I take this information and I want to figure out what is the best ball for me? I'm going to go buy that ball. I need to figure out, okay, this is here. I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually get a golf ball, one golf ball, and I'm gonna make that commitment. All right, Tony, great. Where the hell do I start? Like,
I mean, I
I'm
think
overwhelmed. What do I do?
I say pick a baseline. Pick one of these balls in the test as your baseline, because as
Okay.
we've said, right, like, everything is under the conditions tested. So even if you if you swing exactly 100 miles an hour, it doesn't mean you're going to replicate the results, because the way you deliver the club is going to produce higher launch or lower launch, higher flight, lower flight, more spin, less spin, and ultimately that's going to change the total distance equation. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of this is relative. So if it doesn't matter who you are, right? If you go out with a Pro V1, I'm willing to
Yep.
bet the Super Soft is going to, as an example, spin less. So
Right.
establish a baseline ball. Right?
Okay.
We
So
know,
step one, here we go. Get baseline
establish a
info.
baseline ball, and it can be, if you want to start with a Chrome Soft, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Anything
Right.
on this list, in theory, can work for your baseline. Go out and see what that does, and ask, kind of observe, really kind of take note. Hey, how is this flying off the driver? Do I need it to fly higher, lower? Is this good where I am? Do I need it to spin more, less? Or am I good where I am? Kind of those being your key variables. And again,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to give up distance, not too much, but kind of
Right.
start there and say, hey, all right, I started with a Chrome Soft and I need a ball that spins a little bit more or a lot more. And so, hey, we've got tables for your swing speed, and again, it's going to
Yep.
be pretty consistent, because really you're plus or minus the launch monitors and manufacturing tolerances in a good bit of this. But
Yep.
if you know what the ball you're playing does, or have a good idea of what you need to want it to do differently, say, hey, all right, I want to start by looking at all the golf balls that fly lower than a Chrome Soft. All right,
Right.
now which of those maybe has the spin that I want, and
Yep.
which of the ones that are left is not going to cost me a measurable amount of ball speed. So that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the approach that I would take based off this data. And then, greenside spin may be a factor to think about. We'll have some other stuff that's going to be, I think, very eye opening on the wet dry stuff coming up. So,
Yep.
you know,
The other thing I would say is, because I was talking about this, what we do, all this kind of information with the buddy. And I mean, that's what we were talking about was, okay, how would you figure out what ball I should play? And I said, well, there's part of it that's unavoidable is you got to be willing to spend some time. It doesn't have to be, hours upon hours upon hours, but you need to be willing to spend some time, and you need to be willing to get some data and some information, because their question was a really good one, which was basically, hey, how do I know if I'm hitting my driver too high? It's a great question, because if you don't know what you don't know. So you may be sitting here going, yeah, I think I hit my driver plenty high. And I'm sitting here looking at you going, I've seen, a million people hit drivers or whatever, seen 1,000 fittings, and I can tell you right now, you're not hitting it high enough. Okay, well, how much higher should I hit it? A degree? 2, 3? Well, depends, right? So getting some of that baseline information, and I would shout out Ping on this. They have a great series of charts and information that are out there around both driver, optimizing driver, and also like 7-iron, depending on how much stopping power, which is really descent angle more or less, that you want to see on a particular shot. Those are all over the internet. We can maybe even post them on here. They're quick references. Yeah, super easy to get to, but you got to start, as much as like you're saying, start with a baseline, start with a ball, and then you got to figure out, where do I need to go from here? Is it really too high? Okay, well, yes, I'm playing this particular ball, and what I've been able to figure out is I'm hitting it too high with too much spin. Great. Now you can use all our information and say, okay, what has a lower overall trajectory and less spin, but it may be as much ball speed as this ball? Okay, here are the next 2 balls that I should try. And then we can have that conversation about actually testing once you get it down to, let's say, 2, 3, 4 balls that you think are all in a window for you, that are all going to be good, and you're just trying to determine which is the best of the good bunch. Now we can kind of, get to that, but you got to do some legwork first.
Absolutely.
Last question for me, Tony, for you on this one is, can we use dispersion, or how do I figure out if a certain ball is maybe more accurate than another golf ball?
Yeah, so we've had a few questions about why we didn't include dispersion, and this will be part. We've got at least 2 more posts planned that are kind of broad related to the test, and we'll look at dispersion in one of them. But it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. Like you need to do a ball test the right way. You need to be outside. You need to see the full flight of the golf ball. Mm-hmm. And with that, now you're kind of left in the position of trying to understand what is, call it manufacturing or something with the golf ball, and what was maybe a gust of wind. And so it takes kind of an analysis of dispersion patterns and seeing if a ball or 2 moved against the pattern. And also the other thing to keep in mind, right? If it's just one ball that goes crazy, like, it's not ideal, but that happens. Everybody makes a bad ball from time to time. It's realistically perfect, unavoidable. So it's also, when you look at, a shot area dispersion pattern and putting a number on it, the size of that dispersion ellipse is influenced by like a single shot, right? You have one thing that goes wrong, and maybe it's the ball, maybe it's anomaly, maybe the driver made impact and caught like a dimple just right, which can actually happen and cause it to skew. So it's hard to put a concrete number on it confidently. But it's something we're going to look at. And moving beyond that, if you're kind of worried about straight ball flight in general, that's a pretty simple answer. More often than not, it's not universally true, but when we talk about forgiveness with a driver, it's like, all right, how well does it retain ball speed on mishits and off center and things like that? It's not really applicable to a golf ball. Like, the golf ball just receives the energy from the golf club. Like, it doesn't know. It doesn't know that it's been a hit off center, right? It's just,
wouldn't that be funny?
Instead of delivering we talk about COR and driver rules. Instead of delivering max COR, I only gave you 80% of what I'm capable. So what are you going to? It's effectively like taking 100-mile-an-hour ball speed, driver swing and cutting it down to 80 or 90, depending. Right. That's effectively what an off center or hit is with a golf ball. So in terms of forgiveness, it's more about straightness of flight. And that correlation is really with low spin. A low spin golf ball is going to fly straighter off a driver. That's why, Bridgestone talks about, for example, RXS being a more forgiving option in some cases. So if you're looking, and this is where I say, like, we can talk about optimization, but sometimes you need something else. So if you need something that flies straighter, if you're struggling with a slice and you're looking for the golf ball to be part of the solution, low spin can help with that.
Sure.
Just like my putting, right? We've talked about this.
Right.
Mental dwarfism with the putting,
right.
A pattern on the golf ball has helped. And so, we can talk about what is optimal for me. Titleist says it's left dash based on every other aspect of my game other than putting. I agree. But if I'm losing strokes on the green and I can solve that with a pattern on a golf ball, that can make sense, right? So sometimes you have to overlook what's optimal and find something that addresses the most desperate need in your game.
Yeah. And little teaser down the road, hopefully at some point, this is something we've toyed around with a little bit in my mind, because again, I'm trying to keep it as simple for myself as possible. To me, accuracy, if you will, dispersion, is invariably a function of how consistently that golf ball is manufactured. So is it going to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over?
Yeah, it certainly helps with straight ball flight if the cores are centered and the layers are
It makes
concentric.
sense to me that the more likely that I'm getting the exact same ball on the next one as I did on this one, then again, I'm eliminating certain variables. So when we pair up some of these things with performance reporting like this and manufacturing consistency reporting like we have in Ball Lab, to me, it almost answers both of those questions, at least for me. And then again, you test it out, you go from there. So that is a lot of us yapping at you. We know it. There's more we could get to. We could do this for another 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, and maybe we will, but not on this episode. We're going to come back with, like I said, we got more tests. We got wet versus dry stuff to do. We got Pro V1X or Pro V1, sorry, we got yellow versus the standard white. There's going to be a million questions that come up out of this that we'll do our best to answer. Some of the dumb questions, like the ones about descent angle, we may not answer those. Sorry, whoever told you there's no such thing as dumb questions, they lied to you. There are dumb questions, but we will be more than happy to answer the ones that bring,
especially when they're
value.
Not really questions. They're just like,
thinly veiled.
I don't know much about this, therefore you're invalid.
Yeah, whatever. It's all good. But that is a lot. So MyGolfSpy, Ball Lab, Ball Test, all things golf balls. We'll link them in there. GolfSpy T, GolfSpy C. Find us on the interwebs. Let us know what we can do to help you. Until next week, no putts given. We out.